The 2022 iPad is getting the biggest changes ever. And just to clarify, I'm referring to the entry-level iPad, the cheapest iPad, which will now resemble an iPad Pro and an iPad Air in a lot of ways. So something that we covered in one of our previous videos was that 95Mac exclusively reported that the entry-level iPad would be getting a USB Type-C port, which might seem like a very small change, but that could actually change a lot more things. And I believed two scenarios to be possible here. Scenario one was that we would be getting a full redesign of this iPad, which will then use the second-gen Apple Pencil, which does require flat sides. And the second scenario that I believed to be possible was that Apple would keep the same design as they have now and simply replace the Lightning port with a USB-C port and then release a new Apple Pencil, so same as the first gen, just with a USB Type-C port. But interesting enough, Mark Gurman said in an interview with MaxTech,
should look the same as the current one, but have USB-C.
So essentially, just the port changing. Sadly, he hasn't really said anything about the Apple Pencil. But then, guess what happened? MySmartPrice posted a massive leak, essentially renders based on CAD models, just a few days ago, from a case manufacturer. Now, if you've been following our videos, you probably know that MySmartPrice was a publication that I've mentioned before, and that's because they were crazy accurate in the past. So there's an extremely high chance that this is exactly how the 10th gen iPad would look like. And the weirdest thing about it is that scenario one is false, but then scenario two, which is what Mark Gurman was also saying, is also false. And in fact, we have a third scenario, which is that we are indeed getting a full redesign with USB-C. So we do see a flat frame design, and also the back has been redesigned as well. But then the front has actually remained the same. Like, we still have a home button with a Touch ID sensor. We have some very thick bezels. And yeah, we then have flat edges, a flat frame that does not really match the curvature of the display. So at first, it simply looks like Apple really cheaped out. They just slammed the current 9th gen iPad's front display onto the iPad Air's chassis. And that is true. But at the same time, I also don't think that they really had any other choice. First of all, they are being forced to switch to USB Type-C by the end of 2024 because of those new EU regulations. The iPhone will be switching too with the iPhone 15, as you probably know by now. Had they not been forced, I honestly think that it would have kept the same design for a few more years. And then second, if they had given this the iPad Air's design, I think it would have taken a lot of the sales away from the iPad Air. So in a way, this is sort of like the middle ground option. Although you have to admit that this design is very, very ugly. It looks like a Frankenstein iPad. But then I realized, if you compare this to the first iPad ever released 12 years ago, it looks very similar. Like, even that iPad had a flat frame design. Of course, it had that bulge on the back, which this one doesn't. But other than that, the design aesthetics are very, very similar. But okay, what else has changed? Is the display any bigger? Well, from this leak, I couldn't really tell. But then I remember that Russ Young said a while ago that the display would be increased from 10.2 inches to 10.5 inches. Now, just to give you guys an idea, the iPad Air comes with a 10.9-inch display, and the iPad Pro comes with an 11-inch display. So this 10.5-inch panel would actually match the 2017 iPad Pro and the 3rd gen iPad Air from 2019. And I'm pretty sure that they're very likely using the exact same panel from then. Then I also had to look at the dimensions to see if the iPad was any wider to accommodate this larger display, and it is. It is 179.5 millimeters wide compared to 174.1. But okay, the biggest display question that I have, and you all probably have, is the display finally laminated? Well, it's not really clear from the renders, so let's just think about it. A non-laminated display automatically means a thicker body. So how thick is this? Well, luckily we do have the dimensions. It is 6.98 millimeters thick compared to 7.5 of the 9th gen. So it is thinner, so we have a win. It is laminated, right? Well, don't be too quick. You see, the iPad Air is just 6.1 millimeters thin. And then the 10.5-inch iPad Pro from 2017 and the 3rd gen iPad Air, those were also 6.1 millimeters. So this iPad is noticeably thicker by 0.88 millimeters. That's a pretty big difference. And my guess is that this is only because the display is sadly still not laminated. Now, I do think that this is an on-purpose decision to just make it inferior to the Air, which does make sense. Then if we take a look at a frame, yes, we do have a USB Type-C port, which is a huge change, not just because, you know, you can use the same charger as on your MacBook, but also because we will be seeing much faster transfer speeds. As you probably know, the iPhone that still comes with Lightning only has USB 2.0 transfer speed. So if you're shooting video, especially ProRes, it will honestly take you forever to get that file transferred. Also on the frame, it seems like we have quad speakers. So 2 on the top and then 2 on the bottom, although it is likely just one single speaker inside with 2 speaker holes. But that's still a big upgrade from the single bottom-facing speaker that we have now. Also on the frame, we have a power button and of course the volume switches. But you know what's not on the frame? A headphone jack. Yeah, the 3.5mm headphone jack is now gone. This was actually the only iOS device left with a headphone jack, the 9th gen iPad, but now this is also gone, which makes sense to get rid of with a new redesign. Also, Bluetooth headphones are really cheap now, so you know, I'm honestly fine with this change. You can still buy a very cheap USB-C to 3.5mm adapter if you really want to use wider headphones. And then on the back, the camera module has been redesigned, which is very interesting. So this appears to still be a single camera module, and then the second hole is likely for the mic. So why does it have this weird shape? Why does it look better and like a dual camera module compared to the single module on the iPad Air? Well, it could simply be that Apple wanted to make it look different from the back compared to the Air and the Pro. But then why does it actually stick out so much? Is it because of the thinner body? Maybe, but it could also be because this is a new sensor. The camera on the 9th gen iPad was really bad. That was a super old sensor. So I think that it is a possibility that we could see the iPad Air's camera inside of this new 10th gen iPad. I did find it a bit odd how the smart connector was just not visible on the leak, although I also don't see Apple removing this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to connect a smart keyboard, which the previous model could already connect to. Another big change that has been reported by 9to5Mac is of course the chip, which is being bumped to the A14 from the A13. This is the same chip that we have in the previous gen iPad Air, so the one before the M1, and the iPhone 12. And I gotta say, from the Apple A13 chip, the A14 is a pretty good upgrade. 10% higher performance single-core wise, and 20% higher performance multi-core wise. You won't really notice this in day-to-day use, but it would definitely last you for longer if you plan on, you know, applying all the updates that Apple releases every year. Another new feature that 9to5Mac reported is 5G, which is finally coming to the base iPad. This also makes sense because the iPhone 12 was the first 5G iPhone, and the iPhone 12 also had the Apple A14 chip. I think the only thing that isn't clear at the moment is the price. So the 9th gen iPad costs $329, which I think is a pretty good price. Then the iPad mini is way more expensive at $499, and then the iPad Air costs $599. Now, I do believe that it is very likely for the price to be increased. Apple keeps doing this whenever they have a new design, so I do think that is very likely. If I could guess a price, I would probably say $379 or even $399. I think even that is possible. So quite a big price jump. Which raises the question, will they also keep the 9th gen iPad around for $329? Well, I think that is also a possibility, judging by what Tim Cook has done in the past. Like, you can still buy the Apple Watch Series 3. But overall, I think that even at $399, this is great value. You get, of course, an old design from the front with possibly a non-laminated display, so those are the biggest downsides. But other than that, you get some great performance that you can probably use for the next 8 years or so. I think this iPad is going to last you for basically ever. Also great battery life, USB Type-C, which is huge. Now you can also connect the same Apple Pencil as on the iPad Pro, so that's great. And you can also connect the Magic Keyboard as the higher-end iPad Pro models, which is awesome. So you get a trackpad. I think that's really good. I think the only big downside I would say would probably be the storage, which is likely still going to be 64 gigs. And the moment you upgrade that to 128, that is when you would probably be better off with an iPad Air. But let me know, what do you guys think of this new iPad? Stay tuned for more Leaks Rumors episodes. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.